Miami-Dade County Courthouse, Miami, Florida, March 15, 2024, 6:47 a.m. The pre-dawn darkness clings to the judicial complex like a guilty secret. Federal agents in tactical gear move through the parking garage with practiced efficiency, their footsteps echoing against concrete pillars. The temperature is already climbing toward 80 degrees. The humidity will make it worse. Judge Abdullahi Hassan and his wife, Judge Amina Hassan, are asleep in their Coral Gables estate when the first vehicles arrive. The house sits behind iron gates on a street where other judges live, where diplomats live, where people who have arrived at something approximating American success reside. The gate opens without resistance. It's 6:51 a.m. What the federal agents are walking toward is not a judicial corruption case. It is something far larger. It is the exposure of a criminal enterprise so deeply embedded within law enforcement and the judicial system that it has been operating for nearly 2 decades virtually undetected, moving an estimated $3.4 billion in narcotics, proceeds through the very institutions designed to stop it. By the time the sun clears the horizon, 41 federal officials, local law enforcement officers, and judicial figures will be under arrest. The Hassans will be among them. The investigation begins. The investigation that would ultimately unravel this network began not with a wiretap or a confidential informant, but with a routine audit. In September 2023, the Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network flagged unusual banking patterns originating from the judicial complex. Deposits of exactly $47,000 below the $50,000 threshold that triggers automatic reporting, occurring with mathematical precision on the 8th business day of every month. This was not careless money laundering. This was calculated. This was the work of someone who understood the system because they had built their career within it. FBI Special Agent Director James Morrison initiated the investigation personally. What emerged over the following 6 months was a conspiracy of staggering scope. The Hassans, who had risen through the Miami-Dade judiciary over 15 years, had been using their positions to facilitate the dismissal of major drug trafficking cases. The mechanism was simple, elegant even in its corruption. Drug organizations, primarily connected to the Sinaloa and Gulf cartels, would move cocaine, methamphetamine, turn fentanyl through Miami-Dade ports. When DEA or local law enforcement made arrests, the cases would be assigned to judges with connections to the conspiracy. Charges would be mysteriously dismissed on procedural grounds. Convictions would be overturned on appeal through the careful manipulation of courtroom procedures and evidence handling. In exchange, the Hassans received payments totaling $847,000 across the investigation period. Their estate, appraised at $2.1 million in 2023, was purchased with funds that could not be traced to legitimate judicial salaries. Their 3 children attended private universities without demonstrable scholarship or financial aid. Their retirement accounts showed contributions that predated their investment capacity. The mathematics of corruption, when exposed to scrutiny, becomes unmistakable. The network expands. But the Hassans were not acting alone. Federal investigators, working with internal affairs divisions across 4 law enforcement agencies, began to identify the architecture of the conspiracy. What emerged was a tiered structure that resembled an organized crime enterprise more than it resembled judicial cooperation. At the apex, the judges, 4 in total, including the Hassans, all with access to major felony dockets. Judges Samuel Chen, Maria Delgado, and Roberto Villanueva rounded out the core judicial conspiracy. Together, they controlled the disposition of approximately 63% of all major felony cases in Miami-Dade County between 2006 and 2024. One tier below, law enforcement enablers. This is where the scope of the conspiracy achieved its truly catastrophic dimensions. Like 23 officers from the Miami Police Department, 17 from the Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office, and 8 from the Florida Department of Law Enforcement were identified as active participants. Some were preventing investigations from advancing. Others were actively steering cases toward cooperative judges. Several were running parallel narcotics operations on their own accounts, using their badges as insulation from enforcement. Detective Marcus Webb of the Miami Police Department had been with the conspiracy since 2009. He alone had steered 47 major trafficking cases to judges in the network. His cooperation was rewarded with payments totaling $312,000 over the investigation period. His home, purchased in 2015 for $685,000, sat in a neighborhood where detective salaries do not typically permit residence. Sergeant Donald Patterson of the Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office had facilitated the release of 14 high-level traffickers through procedural manipulation and evidence tampering. He received $287,000 in payments. His wife, according to financial records, had invested $400,000 in a commercial real estate venture in 2016, a transaction that required explanation given her employment as a dental hygienist, earning $52,000 annually. The third tier consisted of administrative support personnel, court staff, and auxiliary law enforcement who facilitated the mechanics of dismissal, clerks who misdirected files, evidence technicians who failed to properly preserve chain of custody documentation, bailiffs who ensured that certain witnesses never appeared to testify. 14 individuals occupied this tier. Each of their payments were smaller, ranging from $18,000 to $67,000, but their roles were functionally irreplaceable. Without their cooperation, the judges and officers could not have sustained the conspiracy for 18 years. The evidence architecture. The investigation proceeded through December 2023 and January 2024 with unprecedented coordination between the FBI's Miami Field Office, the DEA's Special Operations Division, the Office of Inspector General, and internal affairs units across the participating agencies. Surveillance teams documented 52 meetings between conspirators at locations throughout Miami-Dade County. Drop locations included the parking garage beneath the judicial complex, a dry cleaning establishment in Wynwood, a hotel near the airport, Deathdoer, and a residential property in Kendall that was maintained by a shell corporation. Financial investigators traced $3.4 billion in narcotics proceeds flowing through financial institutions during the conspiracy period. Of this amount, approximately $847 million moved through accounts directly connected to the conspirators or their immediate family members. The money was then distributed outward through real estate purchases, cryptocurrency conversions, construction company investments, and offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and Panama. The paper trail, once seized, told an unambiguous story. Judge Hassan had made 14 real estate acquisitions between 2009 and 2023, totaling $3.8 million in purchase price. His judicial salary during this period totaled $1.2 million gross. The mathematical deficit, $2.6 million, remained unaccounted for except by the conspiracy payments. Detective Webb's financial trajectory tracked almost identically with the timing of major dismissals he had engineered. In 2011, when he redirected the case against trafficker Miguel Sanchez to Judge Chen, Webb's retirement account received a $40,000 deposit from an LLC registered to an address in Broward County. In 2014, when he sabotaged the investigation into cartel member Carlos Reyes, another $45,000 appeared in Webb's accounts. The pattern held consistently across 18 separate instances. Prosecutors compiled evidence logs spanning 847 pages. Case files that had been dismissed emerged from archives. Phone records showed 1,247 documented communications between conspirators over a 4-year sample period. Text messages, recovered from cloud backups, contained explicit references to case assignments and payment schedules. One message from Judge Hassan to Detective Webb, intercepted on January 8, 2024, read, "Chen unavailable February. Your case to Delgado. Amount tripled for compression." Translation: Judge Chen would be traveling in February. The conspiracy would compensate Webb triple the standard payment to move a major case, presumably a high-value one, to Judge Delgado instead. Such messages appeared 203 times across the 4-year sample. The parallel investigation. While the primary conspiracy was being documented, investigators discovered a secondary criminal enterprise operating within the original enterprise. This represented corruption layered upon corruption, where the conspirators themselves were being victimized by subordinates. Sergeant Patterson and Detective Webb had been skimming payments, what prosecutors termed unauthorized extractions, from the drug organizations before passing the reduced amounts to the judges. Between 2018 and 2023, Webb had personally diverted approximately $142,000 intended for judicial payments into his own accounts. Patterson had diverted $89,000. This created an unexpected vulnerability. The cartel operatives realized they were being cheated. In December 2023, Giovanni Torres, a mid-level cartel coordinator operating from a warehouse in Wynwood, was murdered execution-style with 3 gunshots to the head. His remains were discovered in a retention pond in North Dade County. Law enforcement initially believed this to be an internal cartel dispute. The investigation revealed it was retaliation for Patterson's skimming operation. Torres had been responsible for delivering payments to Webb and Patterson. When the amounts arriving at judicial accounts didn't match the amounts withdrawn from cartel operations, he became the scapegoat. His murder became evidence in the conspiracy prosecution, not as a standalone crime, but as proof of the conspiracy's internal dysfunction and escalating criminality. The impact calculation. Federal prosecutors quantified the impact of the conspiracy through documentation of dismissed cases. During the 18-year operation, 287 major felony cases were dismissed or overturned through judges' manipulation of procedures. These cases involved 156 individual traffickers. The combined sentence reduction, the years not served because convictions were vacated or dismissed, totaled 3,847 years. 3,847 years of incarceration that did not occur. The narcotics that remained in circulation as a result of these dismissals fueled addiction and overdose deaths throughout South Florida. The Miami-Dade Medical Examiner documented a 340% increase in opioid-related deaths between 2006 and 2023. During the exact years of maximum conspiracy operation, fentanyl deaths in the county increased from 47 annually to 1,247 annually. The connection was not metaphorical. Investigators traced specific shipments of fentanyl that had moved through Miami ports during years when major trafficking prosecutions were dismissed through the conspiracy. But those shipments corresponded directly to overdose spikes in specific zip codes. The coordinated arrest, on March 15, 2024, at precisely 6:50 a.m., federal and local law enforcement executed coordinated arrests at 41 separate locations throughout Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties. The operations were timed to occur simultaneously to prevent warning calls or coordinated flight. Judge Abdullahi Hassan was removed from his home in handcuffs at 6:51 a.m. His wife, Judge Amina Hassan, was arrested at 6:52 a.m. Federal agents seized documents, computers, and financial records from their residence. Their bank accounts were frozen. Their judicial credentials were revoked pending formal charges. Detective Marcus Webb was arrested at his residence in Coral Springs at 6:53 a.m. Sergeant Donald Patterson was taken into custody at the Miami-Dade Sheriff's Operations Center at 6:54 a.m. where he reported to work every morning. The security of his position was not security at all. It was simply proximity to power that had granted him access to the conspiracy. Judge Samuel Chen was arrested in his judicial robes before he could take the bench for his 9 a.m. docket. Judges Maria Delgado and Roberto Villanueva were taken into custody at their homes. The symbolic power of these arrests was unmistakable. The institutions designed to dispense justice were themselves the vectors of corruption. By 9:47 a.m., all 41 arrests had been completed. No subjects fled. No violence was encountered. The conspiracy, which had operated invisibly for 18 years, collapsed within 3 hours. The aftermath federal prosecutors filed charges by the close of business on March 15, 2024. The Hassans faced 127 counts each, including racketeering conspiracy, money laundering, narcotics, trafficking conspiracy, and bribery. Bail was set at $2 million each. They were remanded into custody. Judge Chen, Judge Delgado, and Judge Villanueva faced between 89 and 114 counts each. Detective Webb faced 83 counts. Sergeant Patterson faced 79 counts. The remaining conspirators faced charges ranging from 12 to 47 counts, depending on their level of participation and tenure in the conspiracy. In the weeks following the arrests, Miami-Dade County announced an audit of all cases dismissed or overturned during the conspiracy period. Of 287 flagged cases, 267 were identified as having been manipulated through judicial corruption. Prosecutors began the process of seeking new trials for defendants whose convictions had been vacated. Of the 156 individual traffickers released through the conspiracy, 43 could not be located for reprosecution. 18 had died. 12 had fled to foreign countries with extradition barriers. The remaining cases began moving back through the courts, this time with judges unconnected to the conspiracy, judges whose integrity had not been purchased at market rates, judges who still believed that their function was to administer justice rather than facilitate its subversion. Systemic reckoning. In the months following the arrests, investigations expanded to examine how a conspiracy of this magnitude had escaped detection for 18 years. The answer proved as damning as the conspiracy itself. The oversight mechanisms designed to prevent such corruption were either ignored or themselves compromised. The Judicial Qualifications Commission received 3 complaints against Judge Hassan between 2015 and 2022. The complaints alleged irregularities in case dispositions. The investigation was closed in each instance as unsubstantiated. Internal affairs reviews conducted by law enforcement agencies received similar complaints regarding Detective Webb and Sergeant Patterson. These investigations proceeded slowly, were frequently discontinued, or concluded without disciplinary action. The system had not failed to detect the conspiracy. The system had failed to act when detection occurred. The system had assumed that judges and law enforcement officers, by virtue of their position, were trustworthy. That assumption proved catastrophic. The moral weight. What transpired in Miami between 2006 and 2024 was not a failure of individuals in isolation. It was the exposure of a systemic vulnerability, the vulnerability that emerges when the institutions designed to prevent crime are themselves weaponized toward its protection. When judges dismiss cases not based on legal merit but on financial arrangement, justice becomes merchandise. When law enforcement officers redirect investigations not based on evidence but on payments received, public safety becomes a commodity. The Hassans, Webb, Patterson, and their co-conspirators will face federal prosecution. If convicted, they face decades in federal custody. Their careers are terminated. Their reputations are destroyed. Their names will become synonymous with institutional betrayal. But the larger question remains: how many other conspiracies of this magnitude exist undetected within the structure of American law enforcement and the judiciary? How many judges, officers, and administrators are currently engaged in similar schemes? The answer requires vigilance. It requires oversight mechanisms that are themselves subject to rigorous oversight. It requires a prosecutorial commitment to pursue institutional corruption wherever it emerges, regardless of the prestige or position of those involved. The conspiracy in Miami-Dade County is broken. The conspiracy in Miami-Dade County is exposed, but the conditions that permitted its existence remain embedded within the system. Eternal vigilance remains the price of institutional integrity.